Good morning again, and thank you for being here this morning. We've had a slight change of program. We're accelerating the program a little bit. Patria One Munaf unfortunately couldn't be here. And we are, of course, very grateful and very privileged to have Pak Ilham Habibie here with us this morning. We are going to have a chat, but at the same time, it's going to be an engaging chat. So I would hope that all of you will also join in this conversation that we're going to have. It has no limits in terms of the topics that we're going to talk about. It's a free-ranging discussion. And really, it is to help us stimulate our thinking in terms of some of the challenges that we face. We've been talking a little bit about, Indonesia 2045. Seems like a long way away, 30, almost 30 years, 3 decades. But time flies. And Indonesia, at this very stage in its history, in its life as a nation, having come this far, cannot afford to santai, in the sense of take it easy, right? So, Pak Ilham, we've been talking a little yesterday you were with, in the discussions, and this morning also with Pak Budi, we are talking about transportation. In your view, as we look towards 2045, what is the journey that we need to think about? What are the milestones that you think we should be looking at?
Thank you, Shoeb. First of all, I'd like to convey the best greetings from Pak Habibie, because I'm actually here on his behalf.
Okay,
right? I
yes,
think
that's right.
it probably has not been made clear by the moderator before. Originally, it should have been Pak Habibie speaking here, but he has been ill. He was in the hospital actually for a week, and he's just come out for about a few days. And so the doctors told him it was absolutely not permitted for him to be here today because he needs to rest. He's 81 years old, and he wants to do many more things that he actually can do because of his age. Right? So again, greetings to all of you, and he is very sorry that he can't make it today. So what I did in order to meaningfully be here and still convey something from him to you, I had a chat with him yesterday. Quite late, I have to say. I came there about 11-ish, and we talked until beyond midnight. So it was a very focused chat when we were not disturbed by anything else, but we were just chatting as we do so often. So many things I knew already because, of course, throughout my life I had many conversations with him about these big topics. Where do we want to go? What is the actual target, and how does it work actually, right? So what I'm going to give you as an idea about the 2045, the 100 years of Indonesia, is not target, not a bunch of milestones, but I give you a model. I give you a model that sounds so typically Pak Habibie because he's an engineer like me. So we think in models, we think in processes, and how do we get actually from here to there, right? I mean, yes, it's nice to have a target, but how do you actually want to do it? And I think there's a few center points in this model I'd like to emphasize. One is, well, if you talk about Indonesia, it's a country, but that's
Can you fly that thing?
to make something work. And if you look at a bunch of people, you can actually stratify them into different groups of people. And I think it's probably fair to say that most, if not all, countries that have been successfully developing themselves well into the future, the development of those countries rests upon the shoulders of the so-called middle class. There's a lot of people in this room that belong to this middle class. There is a lot of Indonesians, but if you look at it statistically, it's still not the majority. The majority, the vast majority of any developed country should be the middle class. So that is actually the actual target. If you want to develop Indonesia, that means we want to develop the people, and the people means we want to develop middle class. So how do you do this? How do you develop middle class? Well, you have to educate them. We talked about this yesterday already. There's a few models for that. I mean, there's a wide span. Either you make education a completely private affair, meaning everybody has to pay for it, or you make it free for everybody. Well, we have choices, right? I mean, there are successful examples for both, and whether it works in Indonesia or not, that needs to be, I think, we need to try it out, what works best. We are already in the process of doing that, but I think there's still room for improvement. So education is the center point. But Does it mean that everybody will be educated in Indonesia? Well, if we want to achieve something, then we have to aim high, and it means sometimes you can't really do it here, meaning we need to send a lot of people outside Indonesia, meaning they have to get scholarship, many of them. They have to be directed what they should study. Just look at other countries like China, India, and others. How many students are studying overseas in order to do what? To learn things that they can't get in Indonesia or in their respective countries. So we need to be clear about that. Yeah, so education is a major pillar. The other would be, of course, health, which is more a local affair. But again, I mean, other countries are still grappling with that topic. I mean, just look at the US. I mean, Obamacare, or is it Trump care or Trump no care? I don't know what it is. But it's definitely something that needs to be discussed. And how do we do it in Indonesia? Because an educated population or middle class needs to also be healthy in order to remain productive. But another thing is, how is actually the economic model in Indonesia? And that is something I like to throw another keyword into the round here, which is what I think my father and I agreed on a term called, what is it? Pancasila-based market economics. Okay? So there's a few things that I need to note. One is very common, called market economics. So we want to remain true to the principle that the market will decide who is the winner, who is not the government. However, we cannot leave it totally unregulated. That's what we'll believe. I mean, there's other opinions, probably even in this room, that the market should decide everything and should regulate everything. But in Indonesia, we believe there's another model that we find in Europe called social market economy. That's probably more in Germany or in other continental European countries. Indonesia, the word social sometimes has a kind of a negative connotation because of the past, but because it sometimes translates into socialism, and that is sometimes even going beyond that, and so it's maybe not so, sometimes a little bit misunderstood. So, but Pancasila is the 5 principles that hold our country together, and there's a few that are actually quite directly speaking about economics, how that should be. Or there should be a human side of it that is just and fair, and it should be social justice for all of Indonesia. So there's something in it that needs to be further analyzed, and I think to understand what does it actually mean to talk about Pancasila-based or Pancasila-regulated market economics. That is something we need to probably invest some more research in order to understand what does it really mean. But I think that is, since Pancasila is already something quite widely, it's not only accepted, but it is the foundation of our country. So it should be also the foundation of the philosophy of economy. And that should relate to creating as much as possible human resources that are coming into the class of middle class, and they should be responsible to propel our country to the next level, and to many, many more next levels beyond that. And I think if you understand that as a model, of course, you would then have to think, okay, what is it actually? What do you want to do? Well, then we talk about opportunities, right? I mean, where do we have an opportunity? Say, this morning I had a breakfast with somebody from actually a German consultancy, and we were talking about the automotive sector. And because Indonesia actually is not small when it comes to automotive industry, compared to other countries in ASEAN, there's only 2 of significance. One would be Malaysia with predominantly Proton, and the other one would be Thailand, right? But I mean, the conception of the automotive industry in Thailand from the beginning has been very different than Indonesia. Thailand has been more export-oriented, since Thailand has a much smaller market, and they are focused on the pickup truck or pickup car from the beginning. And we in Indonesia have been more adamant about the domestic market, which has consequences, because right now the dominant vehicle in Indonesia is the so-called MPV. But MPV, the Innova, the Kijang, the what have you, which is produced in the millions in Indonesia. But can we sell MPVs like that in the millions outside Indonesia? Question mark. I don't know. There is maybe a market like that, maybe there is not. That's something to be discussed. If not, what kind of cars can we actually produce in Indonesia where we have a chance in order to be a leader? Is it possible to do that if the industry in Indonesia is predominantly driven by Japanese? I don't know. Or do we have to jump on the next bandwagon, which would be probably not the so-called ICE, or internal combustion engine, but maybe electrical cars, where the plane level field is much more available than in the ICE-driven platforms. If we want to do this, we have to invest heavily into education, into research, into a lot of things. There would be a program that we want to maybe plan in order to achieve something in 2045. That is just one example. I just give you one, but this is quite a significant example because it is also quite clear that in many countries, I don't say it in all, but in many countries, the automotive industry is a major factor in order to spread and create wealth. So it's something which has a major effect on industry in every country, or in almost every country. So basically, these are the keywords: middle class, Pancasila-based market economics, then picking some promising opportunities where Indonesia still have a chance to and there's always a chance. We should never say that, okay, this is something we need to go through the same industrial process that every other country. So before understanding electrical cars, we have to understand ICE-driven cars first. That's not true. There's always a chance to jump on the next bandwagon and to see what technologies, what innovation, what products, what entrepreneurships, models can be tackled with that kind of a model that I just described. I think that, in essence, is what I discussed with my dad yesterday, and I think that he wants to also convey through me to all of you in this room. And by the way, there's some books written about this as well, so if you want to read about this, I think one would be like Democracy in, I don't know, there was an interview with lots of people, including my father, and he also wrote a book himself about his presidency. There's also something written there, but probably you have to collate that information to become one very comprehensive piece of information. So what I'm telling you is that collation, basically. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Pak Ilham. I think you touched on a number of critical points in our journey forward. One of the things that we talked about yesterday, and in fact, one of the things that Indonesia may need to do is, of course, deepen and broaden its industrial base. Because if you want to achieve middle class status, you need to have industries. And industries, and we really need to move beyond our low-end manufacturing model.
Yeah, that's true. And for sure, we should not be overly positive and optimistic to remain and further develop our resource-based industry, which is basically a natural resource. I think we should see that as a startup capital, but it is not the economic machine that will propel our country to the next level. It's not. And we see examples where that has been possible, but don't forget, our country is 265 million people, and to be 300 million people, there is no country in the world that has achieved becoming a developed country of that size, just relying on natural resources. No way. It does not work.
And of course, I mean, environmentally, it would also be it would be disastrous. I mean,
definitely,
right?
yeah.
If you're going
well, of course, you can argue, we should develop Indonesia into a big greenhouse. I mean, we should just remain in agriculture and just plant a lot of proteins or carbohydrates and plant and harvest them and basically package them and do lots of products and sell it to the world, become like the greenhouse of the world. We have the climate, we have the soil, we have the people. Yeah, but I mean, if you think about modern agriculture, and that's a point of argument, of course. I mean, have had lots of argumentation about this point, but if you look at modern agriculture, it is highly mechanized, it is highly automized, it is highly data-driven. Just look at the successful farms in Brazil, in the United States. How many people work there? I mean, they have these big harvesters. There's maybe one guy driving 10 harvesters at the same time. They're all driven by satellites. It is that kind of an agriculture that is successful in the world, and not the one that employs millions and millions of farmers. Not being farmers, farm workers. They don't own land, so they're not really farmers. So that is not the economic model that we should aspire to.
Absolutely. Are there any questions? Yes, Babayu. And behind this.
Hello, Pak Ilham.
Hi there.
Okay, as you may know that actually I'm a medical doctor by education, but I believe that education is more important, so I shifted to education since 25 years ago. And I've been teaching for postgraduates for more than 20 years. And I'm aware of the next session will be educations, but also you cover about educations and health and Pancasila economic model. And I'm aware of that the session should be Habibie session about technology and innovation. So I want to ask about how's the focus of technology and towards the educations, because you know, I've been thinking about e-learning for Indonesia for maybe 10 years ago, and then I have published also my book about how to revolutionize Indonesian education system with e-learning. But that is ideas, but when I myself tried to implement that, I found so many, of course, obstacles that without the government involvement and willingness to really look at that is the most important thing to do, then the idea is just an idea. What I see is that Indonesia needs more educations. I'm challenging for everyone who said no for it. And then the main basic problem with Indonesia is education. And the question is that how much Indonesian has been educated enough. If we see even outside of Jakarta, just a few hundred meters away from Jakarta, the education quality is much less than in Jakarta. And even in Jakarta, the top university in Indonesia is ranked more than 300 in the world. Yeah. So I see that with this digital world, we can offer a lot of contents that is globally accepted quality. But what we don't have is the design of learning, the structure of learning. So they learn many things, but without design, so you go nowhere. So if you have cement of few tons, few containers, and you pour it without design, it goes for nowhere. But if you pour it into a design, you can be 100 levels of buildings. So how you see that the technology can shape the education, which is the most important thing in Indonesia, and what is the most feasible way of doing that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the good question. There's a few aspects that I'd like to explain about technology and education. First of all, technology as a tool to educate, but also technology as a subject itself for being educated in. So let's start with the tool. Because you mentioned already a lot of that. Of course, in today's world, we can imagine many types of learning which I would describe them as unconventional. Right? Still, although there's more and more schools and universities using those tools, but by and large, for most schools that I know, it's still not the mainstream way of teaching. But I think, personally, I think that the role of the teacher and the student, how they see themselves, and that using technology will be also changed. So let's assume that we'll have a lot of tools like that available. Talk about distant learning, talk about smart boards in schools, talk about all kinds of search engine that you can use at any point in time during class and basically enrich yourself while listening to whatever the teacher has to say, if he has or she has to say something anyway. In many cases, the teacher will probably be more like a coach rather than giving you information, because today to get information is so easy. And if you imagine in 2045, to get information is not the issue anymore because it's ubiquitous, right? You have it everywhere at all time, anywhere, and everybody. And so to get information, everybody feels smart already having a smartphone in the pocket. Unfortunately, it doesn't make the user smart, right? Because still you have to understand what the problem really is. Then you have to solve it. Sometimes you need to do a model to solve that. And you have to basically transpose the results of that model back to reality so you know what to do with the results in order to really solve the problem for everybody. So that requires more an attitude or understanding the process, understanding the tools or the many tools you need to use, understanding how to work with other people. So the aims of education might not be, strictly speaking, measurable in how you are excelling or not in the individual disciplines, but the interdisciplinary ability of people to mix things, basically what you learn, and to use it will be, I think, more and more important. And technology, again, plays an important role in that. Actually, what I mentioned yesterday in the talk is I have a little bit experimented that myself. I mean, about 13 years ago, partners and friends of mine, we founded a school in Jakarta, which is basically using a new concept of doing topic or project-based learning. So we don't teach math, physics, biology in Bahasa Indonesia, English, etc., but it's based on projects. Of course, it's still very disputable whether that works or not. I mean, I've had lots of discussions about that as well, but we have results. Now, after 13 years, we have alumni that have successfully gone to very good universities and that have won international competitions. So yes, I think for some people it does work. I don't say it works for everybody. I think it depends on the child or on the student. It depends on the teacher. It depends on the parents as well, because they really have to believe in this. They have to be supportive. So I think technology, again, as a tool, will change, will give you a lot of different ammunition to really achieve the goal, but it changes the process itself as well. Right? So that's one thing I like to say. The other thing is, and that is something I actually maybe did not mention enough, but I like to emphasize that, is the fact that in Indonesia, if you compare that with other countries, we far lag behind producing, I say producing is maybe a little bit inappropriate term, the right type of human resources. We need more people that are trained to work with or create or innovate with technology. Yeah. That could be technologists, could be engineers, scientists, but if you look at the sheer numbers, we are lagging so far behind. And we need to really, I think, be a little bit more pushy about convincing our young people that this is something very, very important. It's something that maybe it has to do that that kind of a subject is not taught in a, call it, sympathetic or interesting way in elementary and high school. So it becomes even less interesting if you have to make a choice and have to basically commit yourself for studying 4, 5, 6 years of hard working to become an engineer or anything like that. But I think in order to tackle those big challenges in the future, no way are we going to do this if we don't have the right human resources. And for that, we need those kind of people a lot. So technology is not only a tool, but it's also actually a profession. It's something, it's a certain type of human resources which are solution-oriented, which are innovative and creative in a technical, in a detailed, in a quantitative way, analytical way. Yeah.
Thank you. You had a question, sir? Yes, can we get a mic?
Gentleman from Monash.
Good morning, gentlemen. My question to you is, your government here, I'm sorry, Damien raised my name. I live in Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong, it is the cheapest place in the world to buy a Tesla. That is how one of the things that they are doing to try and fix their pollution. Does your government have any plans to implement tax advantages for people to turn towards electric vehicles? In China, I lived in Shenzhen for 18 months. In China, taxis now are electric vehicles. Could you imagine if you took every car that's a taxi out of Jakarta and transferred it into an electric vehicle, what difference we'd have in 12 months' time if we took another reading? Is there any plans to give some sort of tax advantage towards people and companies to turn towards electricity and alternative energy sources?
Well, thanks for the good question. In fact, you're very right. I mean, tax is a major issue in order to achieve targets. In China, they have, I think, done the right thing, because it is virtually impossible to come to the same technological level for Chinese industry as, for instance, a country like Germany or France, because of the time. I mean, they have 100 years of research, of resources available in there. No matter what they do, they cannot surpass or come to the same level like other countries. But in an electrical vehicle, they can. And so they've done the right thing. They've pushed the envelope. They have a lot of people that are working on research and development, and they've also structured the financial incentive, including taxes, I think, in the right way. In Indonesia, I haven't seen that yet. what we've seen in Indonesia were various attempts to produce something like a electrical car in terms of a prototype as a national project. Unfortunately, that has not been very successful yet, but I think we should not give up so easily. There's still, I think, possibilities for us in Indonesia to go along a similar route. Yes, we lag behind China and we lag behind other countries, but the lag is not that big as, for instance, in the more conventional ICE or internal combustion engine-based industry. So that is a good chance. I think another chance would be if you don't talk about cars, but let's talk about motorcycles. We have 18 million motorcycles in Indonesia, and if you can imagine a decent part of it being electrical, maybe that's a little bit more easier entry door to a vast industry with lots of industrial consequences. Just imagine we produce a lot of electrical scooter in Indonesia, not only produce, but we develop those here, including the batteries, including recharging stations, including all the other services around the electrical motor scooter. And that would be, I think, something we should really seriously think about. Yeah.
Do you think that has to be a government-driven initiative with private sector support, or do you think that is more a private sector-driven thing and the government just gets out of the way?
I think the government needs to be supportive when it comes to, like the gentleman said, tax. Tax is a very, very important thing. Yeah. Also, I could imagine, for instance, that the government, they have resources available for doing certain types of research, right? I mean, you can give research grants or give scholarships for certain types of people that want to study something overseas, maybe going into the direction of developing something that has to do with electrical vehicles, right? I mean, that would definitely, I think, push the country more towards an industry that really has a chance to be successful not only in the national but also at least regional, if not international level. I mean, what Indonesia has as an advantage in petro is actually we have a vast domestic market. I mean, 80 million people, 80 million electric scooters or motorcycles. Just imagine just 10% of that, 8 million, that's quite a decent size, right? I mean, and that's something to start with. And then from then on, I think we can maybe later the government will more retreat to get involved. As I said before, the government should maybe regulate it, but they should not pick the winners. The market needs to be doing that. That is probably the healthiest way to establish a good and very solid and very competitive industry, very productive industry in Indonesia.
Okay, maybe we have one last question. Oh, okay, two. That's it. The lady at the back, and then the lady up here. Can you please maybe stand up so they know where you are?
Hello. I want to come back.
Could you please identify yourself?
Yes, I'm Arista. I'm working for Mercedes-Benz. So basically, I have a little bit background of Germany as well.
Mercedes-Benz.
I'm coming back to the topic of your human resources. Maybe as you know, Indonesians are considering in Germany as one of the smart people actually working in Germany, which is actually, this is also kind of a proof that we have the right human resources, but as also you know that not only in Germany but also other countries, we have a lot of smart people which is coming from Indonesia, but they prefer to stay not in Indonesia and they prefer stay outside Indonesia because they don't know what to do here. So my question is for people like me and the others who has this background and actually want to build or develop Indonesia as well, but let's say still, what should I do in Indonesia because the government that support us on, you know, that kind of things, which is maybe you hear about this already, and what idea you have for us and what can we do to contribute, or how can you help us to change our mindset, which is some of us already have the mindset to develop Indonesia as well, but as you know, there are a lot of people like still considering, should I go back or should I not? So what kind of campaign we can do for the people out there to come back Indonesia and build the future of Indonesia to be better? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, maybe in interest of time, we just take the other question and then you can answer. One more question here. Yes, please, go ahead. Mike, di tengah-tengah. It's coming behind you. Oh, both of them are coming to you.
Hi, I'm Giovanni. I hope my question has been in your chit-chat with your father. The first, how to produce Indonesian as a creator or designer. And second, how to develop research environment in Indonesia. Who are the main stakeholders and what role are they?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's actually three
Good
questions,
question,
right?
yeah.
3 questions, but that's okay. Well, to the first question, I think there's a lot of answers to that question. One answer you would probably get from lots of people, not only me, is, well, if we cannot find something where we can excel at in Indonesia with our background, then we have no other way, if we want to remain in this country, than to create something, which sort of answers your question as well about the creation. And what I mean is, and that's getting more and more important in many countries around the world, is we have to be more and more developing our entrepreneurial skills and start something which uses what we have learned abroad to a great extent, and we hopefully can then be successful in our own country. It is not easy though, because the success rate, of course, is not very high, not only in Indonesia, anywhere. I mean, to be an entrepreneur is tough, and not everybody can actually do it. So it's not an answer for everybody that has the same challenge that you just mentioned, actually. But for some, it is an answer. So, and we have seen that in Indonesia. I think you mentioned it in your speech before, that Indonesia actually ranks number 3 in the world after the US and India, I think, right? The US, I think, leads by far. They have like 30,000. 37,000. India also quite 4,000, but Indonesia is not far behind with 1,500. Yes, exactly. So there are some Indonesians, some fellow Indonesians that come to that conclusion and say, okay, I am a computer scientist, or I have studied business, or I want to do education, but my idea is really nobody can accommodate that in Indonesia, so why don't I try something on my own, and that'll be it for the next few years. That would be one answer. The other would be that, well, some Indonesians, I've seen it quite a lot, they on purpose stay for, let's say you study, because you mentioned Germany, after the study you stay for a few years in Germany and work with a German company there. Many companies in other countries, they like to actually be present in Indonesia, because Indonesia is not only a large country, but it's also a large country, a very large country in an even larger regional, organization, or call it an economic zone, which is ASEAN. So if you have an Asian strategy as a company, in the past, people would immediately say, okay, Asia means China. Okay, Asia means India. But I mean, many companies now understand that Asia is not equivalent with China and India only as a growth strategy, but there is something like ASEAN, which is 650 million people, and out of that 650 million people, 41% is Indonesia. Meaning to say, as an alternative, that if an Indonesian really wants to go back in Indonesia, and he wants to, or she wants to be coming back and finding a job, that sometimes it's not a bad idea to basically work with a company in that individual country, and then work with that company to be stronger in Indonesia or in ASEAN, and then thereby coming back to Indonesia and contributing to what we can do in Indonesia. The third thing is, and that will be my last, is many things, and that will be a little bit more about entrepreneurial, but even beyond the usual entrepreneurial definition of doing a new company. But what I see in the future is, because of this many years of disruption that lay ahead of us, that we probably have to redefine what does it actually mean to do work, division of work, right? I mean, so there will be things that need completely new modeling. In the beginning, that kind of a modeling and thinking and thinking or tinkering that will be basically maybe done to a certain degree outside Indonesia. And then can be applied in Indonesia, because this kind of disruption we see in Indonesia as well. To give you a question that still needs to be answered, and there is no answer anywhere. What will happen to the world if there will be a foray of combination of artificial intelligence and IoT, plus an armada of robots and driverless cars and I don't know what have you. Where are the jobs? Well, I don't want to be ending this note with a pessimistic note, but I give you an example which has nothing to do with this. But many hundred years back, there was a sultan in a kingdom or in an empire called the Ottoman Empire. The sultan residing in Istanbul. There were many thousands of people hammering at his door and begged him to forbid a machine to come into what was then the Ottoman Empire, which was the printing machine. In those days, if you want to buy a book, you have to ask somebody to copy, handwritten copy. You can imagine how expensive a book is. Right? But there were literally thousands of people living from that occupation. And there's Mr. Gutenberg, another German guy, he invented this book printing machine at the same time that Luther came about. And that was a threat to thousands and thousands of people in the world and also in the Ottoman Empire. So for a certain time, the Sultan forbade that. And what happened to Ottoman Empire is they basically became less competitive. Yes. Because what books mean is also that they make education and knowledge more accessible, more affordable. So I think it's very dangerous basically to see only the threat if it comes to new opportunities or new technology, but there's always a good side of it. It's like you look at a weapon, yes, a weapon, a revolver. You can kill a person with that, but you can also defend yourself, or you can shoot an animal that you want to eat or something. There's always a good side of something, right? So, and so what I like to say is there is a lot of thinking that still has to be done regarding these new technologies. What is really the impact? And so even in the so-called developed countries, you don't know that yet. And maybe you want to remain there and think together with other bright minds, think about that and apply that in a totally new way in our own country. Now, talking about creativity and what was the other thing? And design. Research and technology. Yeah. Research, yeah. First of all, let's talk about creativity. I think that most Indonesians and also other non-Indonesians in this room would agree with me that Indonesians in general are very creative people. If I look at the IT sector, for instance, it is known in the industry that one of the best web designers when it comes to visualization are Indonesians. They beat their competitors from many, many countries because they are so creative in certain means. When it comes to visual matters, very creative. I think that creativity is already inherently there in Indonesia because of manufacturers. First of all is the nature. Indonesia is a country that is so endowed with what I said before, natural resources, or with a nature which is very friendly to humans. And sort of, we have a big variation of many things around us. And so every day we are faced with this diversity. Indonesians themselves are also very diverse people. And in fact, if I think what creativity, or maybe we should call it also the realization of innovation. It needs diversity. And it needs not only diversity, but it needs also a certain culture to handle diversity in an open and tolerant way. Indonesians are very diverse people. I mean, we find from west to east at the 5,000 kilometers, 17,000 islands. I don't know how many different languages and subcultures. And all of those have their own creations, and they have their own traditions and their own designs. And for an Indonesian, we can basically source from that pool. And that makes Indonesia, or Indonesians, very creative people. What we are lacking is, I think, not creativity, but we are lacking to channel that in an organized way. I think what Indonesians are not, I think sometimes lack of organization when it comes to not once or twice, but in a continuous way. Like an industry, we have many people that are successful for maybe a certain time, but then it starts to falter. Because to make it a system, to make it a process, something which is sustainable for many years to come, not dependent on one person only. That's basically industrialization. Yeah. We have not gone through that process yet. I think as a society, as a country, as a culture, that is still ahead of us. We're in the middle of it. We're going through it, and we will achieve it. But that is where basically we are lacking when it comes to creation. Not in creation to create just one beautiful piece of art or one beautiful product or service, but to do it continuously in a sustainable manner, in a process-oriented and basically repeatable. And that is what we lack. And for that, to basically give you, to connect it to your next question, we need to be more aware about the importance of research. And research, to give you more numbers, I'm sorry I dump a lot of numbers on you. If you look at countries in the world, you can classify into various groups of countries. Let's call them the developed and the developing countries. I know this is sometimes not popular anymore. You call it the emerging countries today. But let's stick to this nomenclatura. So for the World Bank and another organization called OECD, they basically say that for a developed country, you need to spend minimum 2% of your GDP on R&D. A country like Germany, was mentioned before, spends about 2.7%. World champion at this point in time this year has been, I think, South Korea, with about 4.3%. Israel usually ranks very high as well, around 4%. Japan, 3.5%. That would be the numbers for the so-called developed countries. The United States, 2.7%. The so-called emerging countries, China still is, although quite accomplished, but it's still an emerging country. They have 1.4%, Malaysia 0.7%. We in Indonesia have less than 0.1%. And what does it mean? I mean, where is this 0.1% anyway? If you look at another structure about research, research and development, that whatever percent we have in any country should be 2/3 by the private sector and 1/3 by the government. In Indonesia, it's 80% government, 20% private sector. So I think what does not work in Indonesia, I think, and that is the problem, is the collaboration, the successful collaboration between the industry and the academic sector. I mean, we do have this ivory tower, and it's a whole city of towers in Indonesia when it comes to the universities, and I think probably Monash University can give us a model how to collaborate successfully, and others, of course, it's not only Monash, I mentioned it because it was mentioned before, but others, of course, can maybe lead the way and show how does it really work to work successfully and sustainably with industries for a real win-win cooperation that brings something good for the industry, but also for the university. I personally tried it myself, and there's a lot of suspicion of both sides. I mean, the industry always suspicious. Can the researchers in Indonesia really do the job? And once they achieve it, can they basically remain confident about that, confidential about this? Will they not share it with lots of other people so the competitive advantage will really remain sustainable? That will be the suspicion of the industry usually. They are more comfortable buying something off the shelf, most probably from outside, and pay royalty for that, but it's something they have in their hands and works, and that they trust that better than working with their own universities in Indonesia. The universities are also quite reluctant. They think, okay, when these people from industry come, then they don't remunerate us sufficiently. It's not fair. They take all the benefits and we get nothing. We just do the work. It's on both sides. We need some examples of things, and that needs to be, I think, guarded. Maybe that would be a role of the government. Basically, just bring a group of potential collaborators into one room and basically work on a project supported by government, perhaps electric scooters. There's something to be developed at Indonesian universities. Let them collaborate with the companies and basically be a mentor, be a coach, sometimes be a leader as a government in order to make it work, right? In the end, it's also task of the government. But research in Indonesia, and I have to say research and technology, research and development, yes, we still have to work a lot on that. That is something we have major deficiencies. Yes.
Okay, unfortunately, we have run out of time. I know we could go on all afternoon, maybe all day, but Pak Ilham, thank you very much for your thoughts and your insights. I think the electric scooter is a great idea, and hopefully we can take that up. Also, please send our best wishes to Pak Habibie, and hopefully he can join us sometime in the future. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Pak Ilham.
Thank you once again.